Look
at your studio.
A good background.
Yeah, they're getting better at it.
I know. Is it good proportion? It seems like a pretty good proportion.
Yeah, let's see what happens if I pick one. Oh, I don't have many choices.
No, you have to download. You have to like pull them.
You know, when we do makeup again, at least not yet.
Oh, my brain is tired, Leigh.
Did you understand my text about the 3 clips?
Oh, no, I didn't get a text. Hold on.
We can talk later. I just realized that by sending out what I did by itself is not very effective, but there's a little mini story within the story.
Yes.
Better.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't see me either. There I am. Well, after I got off and everybody left, I took an hour nap. So I feel good now.
Good. Yeah, I didn't get a text from you about anything.
That's okay. That's just too weird.
Naps make everything better.
Naps do make everything better. Thank you for saying that, Donna.
Except my to-do list.
Oh. Yeah, that makes sense.
So do you know what clip I was talking about? If you don't, we can get that later.
I'll find it. I know I can picture it in my head. I'm trying to think.
Basically, because I said about progress in the space race, and then they said about progress replacing God. And then we end up with, we hope that will be positive influence. Like that, it's a little mini story, maybe.
Yeah, that's good.
And if we put that together, it'll feel like I said something.
You said stuff.
Yeah, it's just so short and it's scattered. So
I know.
I feel like I quote you all the time.
That's good. Oh. All right, let me get this slideshow.
I can hear Donna, I can't see you, which is fine. You're in your jammies or dirty kitchen or.
All right, I'm going to test the sound here in just a second.
Hi, Miss Kirsty.
Can you hear that? All right. All right, I'm sharing screen, share, PowerPoint, share, more. All right, I'm testing it. Kirsty and Leigh, see if you can hear it.
This is the Math Map book.
Okay.
I heard it.
Good. I'm going to just mute myself for a second because I have a granddaughter wanting to tell me goodnight. So I'll be right back.
Leigh, is my sound okay? I changed my setup a little bit. I have a different microphone.
You're loud to me, but that's probably my side.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, because it sounded so loud from earlier today. Yeah. Now you're not gonna yell at me. Yeah, I would be fine.
Thanks.
Did you get anywhere with that IMDb or wiki?
My first attempt at the Wikipedia got rejected because it sounded too much like a reference letter, and it needed more references. So I submitted one for CC also, and that one has not, but they say it can take up to 2 months to actually hear back.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised. So I'm going to try and get more references together and
Okay.
beef it up.
Well, I mean, if you can start it and we can just hand it over to Lexi, I didn't expect you to keep doing it, but you're just fast at those things.
So I did make a submission for both of them, but they have not yet been accepted. And yeah, I think with the IMBD, you're supposed to be able to claim your own thing, but maybe that's already been done.
Yeah, like I don't know how I'm on there already, and is there a password? Right, that's what I don't.
I was gonna try, and I haven't yet, but I was gonna try the free, doing the free trial, because then I can get your contact information. And that way that might help us know like who has it. So. And then I guess we just kind of have to wait and see if they add. Like we can add something that doesn't show up when you look for it.
Somebody probably has to create the images and things though.
But it would be easier if we could, if it ended up on there and then we could just link to it. So.
Right. Hi, Sherry. Hey, Joe. Who else is here?
Hey.
Jan and Kyle. I just found a spelling error on our week 3 cover. It might have already been caught and mine's older. Superfluous is spelled wrong. At least it's a hard word to spell.
Is that on this right here? Is this the cover?
Got that, Sarah?
Yeah, that's on mine it's wrong. I'm the one we sent to the pilot.
SUPERFLUOVS. Is that what that says?
Lewis would be SFLOUS. FLUOUS, not a V.
Yeah, it just looked like a V.
It's incorrect on both my complex that I just ordered for class and my comparison I printed out a couple weeks ago.
There we go.
Okay.
We can all go home. We found an error. We can go fix it. You're our beta helping us.
See how integrated we are. We're talking about spelling and math.
No.
I feel like to get my full, like all the errors that I find in little things or questions that I have, you just need a videotape me doing it because I'm talking to myself.
Yeah.
So like, this would be helpful, but I don't think I want to do that.
Lee, Sam's listening over my shoulder, so he grabbed it.
See? Saw your chat. We're waiting for the atomic clock to go off.
Yes, the atomic clock. Welcome, everyone. It is almost time. I'm already singing it. Joke.
This is the Math Map Book Club, where ordinary parents encourage one another to develop an extraordinary appreciation of math. We love what we know and struggle over the unfamiliar. Through weekly conversation and exploration among friends, we can begin to enjoy ideas that seem difficult. Join our book club as we discover how math helps us to know God and to make Him known.
Hi, I'm Leigh Bortons, and it's Monday, January 23rd, 2023. Welcome to the Math Map Book Club, where Kirsty Gilpin and I discuss a math concept each week from our soon-to-be-released math curriculum for families with students in classical conversations. Kirsty and I have spent a lot of years discussing the difficulties of math education, and we found there are many reasons for the difficulties, but they can be identified and they can be overcome. I personally love spreadsheets for the same reason I love math problems. They teach me to read right and left as well as up and down, which is the same thing that happens when you practice reading algorithms, steps, and processes in math formulas. It teaches see more because you don't just read left or right like in a novel, you have to also go up and down. Kirsty, why do you like math?
Well,
This is the Math Map Book Club.
It's okay.
well, just this evening, Lee, this is a great example of why I love math. We were talking about the look and say sequence, and I happened to look it up, and I found all these graphs and this depth of material that I was like, I need to look more into this. And so it's a sequence that really isn't mathematical, although it uses numbers and it's a sequence, but it's really more about reading and language. And yet the underlying structure is incredible and phenomenal. And so it seems like there would be no real pattern to it when it comes to mathematics, but the patterns that support it were just amazing to me. So that idea that math is so interconnected, that there really aren't these isolated ideas out there, is one of the things that makes me love math.
Are you going to show us one of those sequences tonight or a different night?
If we have time, we can maybe look at it at the end.
Yeah, I still struggle over them too. And I'm supposed to be able to good reader. All right, so thanks. So this book club's a little different because we're studying a lesson a week from a math text over 30 weeks in 2023. We will be taking the summer off, and the book club schedule is designed for parents who want to prepare to teach their children ahead of time. So we're discussing the first semester this winter and spring, and then the second semester next fall. To access the Math Map, you need to be a member of Classical Conversations CC Connected. Please feel free to participate in the discussion, even if you are not in CC, as we will show pertinent information as we talk about math. So as usual, we're going to start off with our cover page, because each week we consider a reflection or quotation that's part of our exordium for the Math Map lessons. And tonight we're going to be discussing lesson 3, comparisons, and why comparisons are so important. So Kirsty, it looks like we've got it on our screen. Can you read the quotation?
Sure. So I actually pulled up the art this week instead of our quotation, because something about this piece of art really captures for me the idea of comparison. One of the things that we're doing when we move into week 3 is we're moving into one dimension. So weeks 1 and 2, we were really focusing on 0D. where things were all in isolation. And once we hit 3D, we're now, lesson 3, we're in 1D. And now we're going to bring order to mathematics. We're going to bring order to the numbers. And order requires really two things. It requires a way to compare things, and it requires an origin. And so I love this piece of art because we get this idea of comparison in the scales, and that origin being in the middle. But it also gives us this picture of blind justice, that there's no, to really have order, we can't have favoritism. That we want to have a true standard that we can compare things across. And so there's just a lot of spiritual depth, I think, that we can bring out of this picture when we're talking about comparison, as well as helping us to start to understand the power of the real number line and what it means for how we can compare and order numbers.
Great. Let's spend a minute on this picture here. Can you guys see it well enough if I ask you some questions about it? So to me, it's a great piece of artwork to go over with little children, because it's so interesting what's around her. So for instance, do you guys see like dragons with curly cute tails? And it looks like there's some kind of like dolphins or whales. I don't even know what they are. Peacocks and owl at the bottom. Does anybody have any idea why these are the symbols that are around justice?
Well, wisdom, I would say the owls,
Okay.
potentially.
Yeah.
Who else has something?
Got
Peacocks may be for beauty.
There's a lot of different kinds of birds on here.
I see snails as well, which could indicate slowness.
Taking your time. Yeah, that's good.
There's a fox and there's mice, which I think are like cunning, and they get what they need and what they want without any regard for anyone else.
Yeah. So, I mean, so an older student or ourselves, we could research more about this photo and decide if what we just said is true, or are we just making things up because we're creative people and we can look at a picture and make a story out of it because we just like ideas. And there's some
I
ugly
see a
things.
bumblebee.
Yeah.
There's a bee.
Oh, there's two of them.
Maybe pulling out the truth of something, like how it sucks the honey. I don't know.
Is it nature, the justice of nature?
Mm.
And is nature just if you think of hurricanes and earthquakes?
Mm. Oh yeah, Sherry put oil lamp with a flame.
Where's that?
Mm.
Above the dragline with the curly Q, it's like on his.
Oh,
Oh yeah. That
And
is
so
a
what
flame. I thought that was a bird.
so
Like
what could you
upside
do with
down.
your little kids? What could you count in this picture?
Birds or just animals.
There's a
It's
lot
like
to
the Scholastic magazines that I always used to beg my mom to give me when we were in the doctor's office, the Seek and Find.
Mhm.
Circle all the owls.
Good. Yes, and isn't it interesting? The longer you look at it and actually ask questions and compare things, the more you see. So to me, that's part of the main reason we study math. So thanks for
It's also
introducing that.
symmetry.
Mhm.
Is
But there's
whatever
not.
one side is on the other side.
But it's not perfect symmetry. They're a little bit different on each side.
So what's the title on the side of it?
Justice from the Cardinal Virtues by Nicholas D. Byron.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I wonder about the virtues, if that refers to other pieces of art, if it's a series. Or if it's something about virtue and all those animals and nature around it. Anyway, Thanks for letting me get sidetracked there, Kirsty. I just always like the art. So we've identified 2 reasons that most people struggle with math. The first one being that it's a foreign language. And the second one being that we expect it to be orderly, and then we don't like it when it's not. And sometimes we don't understand what happened to the order. And then, of course, our school experience usually is that there's not a lot of order to it. So with the math map, we're trying to resolve those 2 issues. Kirsty, do you want to respond to anything about just the overall ideas that we're trying to do in comparison in the math map?
Sure. So just one more week really looking at these domains and the idea of building, right? Each year building on these ideas. And I don't know what reminded me this week, but I was thinking about that adage I heard years and years ago, right? That you should have when you're reading to your kids, you should be reading 1 grade level ahead. That if they're reading for just working on it to read at grade level, right? But if they're having to comprehend it and respond to it, they should be reading like 1 grade level below. And I thought about that and the fact that we do read to our children these more advanced texts, well, not textbooks, but textbooks, in order to build their vocabulary and to introduce them to ideas. But somehow we've lost that in mathematics. We say, no, we're going to save these ideas for later. And so we parse the ideas out over 12 years instead of saying, hey, just like I can read more advanced literature with you, I can read more advanced math with you as well. And so I think that's one of the things that we're trying to do. And the idea of this, the importance of language came up from 2 different people this week. And so Jill, are you on tonight?
Yes, I'm here.
Would you like to share just your testimony as a Challenge 3 tutor this year when it came to the language of mathematics?
Sure. So I attended some math camps that CC held. And the first one I went to, I remember following along some math that either it had been 20 years or I had never done it. I'm not sure which. And Leigh was there. And at one point she looked at me and said, are you with us, Jill? And I said, no, but I will be. And having now done this for, some time, I can follow along. I am learning more and more about it, more and more comfort with it, more and more familiar. And even the things that I can't just do without charts or do without a refresher, when I see it other places, I recognize it. And so I am my first year as a Challenge 3 tutor this year, and I haven't done chemistry since, I was a long time ago. And the math in it is not frustrating to me. It's not difficult the way I expected it to be. And I know it's because of my exposure to math and keeping math in front of me and reading math and understanding math words. And so when I see these things, I'm thinking, okay, I have to learn it, but it's not intimidating to me. And I'm convinced if I hadn't been doing math map this amount of time, that the work I did in Challenge 3 this year with math in motion and with chemistry, I'd be in over my head, or at least barely up to here. And so this language of math has equipped me so much more than only able to look through math map materials.
That's really good to hear, Jill.
Donna said something similar. Donna, do you want to share with us what how you described chemistry?
So I've always thought, even in high school, that chemistry is just algebra with dangerous chemicals. So it has a little bit higher stakes.
I love that when you shared that with me, and I thought I really enjoyed that, the idea of algebra with higher stakes. Maybe that's what we should do is, when everybody's doing their math exercises, is, if you don't get it right, it's going to blow up.
That's great. Okay, so I've got a bunch of questions for Kirsty, and I'm hoping you guys do too. But before we do, I want to thank our sponsor, ccconnected.com, where the math booklets discussed by the club can be downloaded by Classical Conversations members. Look ahead to the book club schedule on leebortons.com under the Math Map Book Club tile, and work through the next lesson 4, which will be addition and subtraction before next week. So you can go to ccconnected.com to download the Math Map Naturals, which is in beta form, and that's the one we're focusing on this year. And remember, your friends can just show up, and people can watch this recording anytime they want afterwards, even if they haven't reviewed the booklet for the week. I know Kirsty and I wanted to do this because, by having a series of recordings that match up with the weeks done ahead of time, hopefully parents will have some things they can pick and choose and just hear a little bit more about why we're doing what we're doing. And you might notice that a lot of this is very much high level overview. So I appreciate those of you that already have been doing the math maps sticking out with us here and helping with the book club. Chime in, help people see why the math map itself is important and why just, the orderliness of it's important, the notation and the language. So any stories you have to share about the language side of it this year would be really appreciated. So remember, next week it's going to be addition and subtraction, which, well, it's starting to sound like a normal math text at that point, right? But today we're going to start with comparison. So I have a question for Kirsty, and then you guys start thinking of questions too. And, if you downloaded your notebook or your booklet, feel free to ask anything that's in there. So we have moved, you said a little bit earlier tonight when you introduced, we've moved from 0 dimension to 1 dimension. And we're going to start talking about arithmetic. Why is comparison the first week study in the 6 lessons of 1 dimension?
So I always like when you talk to people and you have this this visual image of all these numbers just kind of floating around, right? And they're all isolated. They can't interact. They don't know where the other ones are. They're just there. And then all of a sudden we go into 1 dimension and you have this visual of these numbers sort of being sucked onto a number line, right? And the reality is that they were there, they just couldn't see the relationship. But now that we open up this relationship, we first of all have to have an origin, right? We have some point that is central by which everything is ordered. And there's a line. And because I can now talk about where those numbers are in relation to my origin, which is 0, now I can compare the numbers. So I can say, okay, well, 3 is this far from 0, and 2 is this far from 0. So which one's closer? Well, 2 is closer. So 2 is less distance away, right? 2 is going to be less than 3. And so now I can start comparing those numbers and get a sense of relative size. I couldn't talk about size in 0D because it really didn't have any meaning, right? And so now I can talk about size. I can also talk about direction. Last week we talked about infinity, and we referred to positive infinity and negative infinity, but really in 0D, infinity doesn't really have any meaning. And so now we're in 1D. I can talk about the fact that my numbers keep getting bigger and they're heading to infinity, right? I'm going to positive infinity or negative infinity. All of a sudden, 1D gives me a place and a direction that I can use these numbers and these words to discuss these ideas of place and direction and comparing numbers.
That's good. So it just opens up a whole new vista of language in math, because now there's a relationship. In the comments in the Facebook and the social media I've been posting, I put a question for the audience to think about, because it's what intrigued me the most when you and I first started talking about 1 dimension, 5 years ago, was this idea that 1 dimension doesn't allow for the words vertical, horizontal, or oblique. And I wanted to say a vertical line to, in problems, and you would say, but compared to what? Is it vertical or horizontal? So can you explain that a little bit better than I am?
Sure. So vertical and horizontal, and if you want to click the next slide, Julie, I think we've got those questions there, but So here's a picture from a chart from this week, and I went ahead and pulled out that line, right? We have one line in 0D. And we can look at this page and go, oh, well, it's drawn horizontally. And oh, there's something over there that's drawn vertically. But it's relative to the page, right? It's in comparison to something else. If I just have a line and that's all there is, I don't really know how it's oriented, right? It's kind of like for us on the surface of the earth, I don't know if I'm right side up or upside down, right? With respect to my house and the surface of the earth, I know that I'm right side up, but I don't really know what's up and down when I zoom out, right? Where am I, right? It doesn't have meaning if I don't have something that I'm comparing it to. And so it's the same with horizontal and vertical.
I'll say that's really, like, I think about my grandbabies, and when they're around this coming weekend, I'm going to ask them that. I'm going to say to them, are you standing on your head? And of course they'll stand on their heads, and then ask them, are you standing on your head compared to Pluto? And then, just give them those references. So it's a way to get the vocabulary in their brains and to feel it, because they will do things upside down and hang upside down the playground equipment and things like that. But I remember when Kirsty first told me that, I was a little bit quick on that one compared to other things she's told me about, but I was like, I remember I slapped my leg and said, get out of town. You mean they cannot be vertical and horizontal? And so that just, made me realize how wonderful it would be as a young person to know that there's limits to what I can do in each dimension. That if I'm taking an exam or trying to study one-dimensional math, there's ideas I don't have to worry about yet. I can get the fundamental ideas related to that dimension down first. So I don't know, do you guys have any other kind of questions that would relate to how fun 1D is? Next year you will.
So Leigh, in our just a shout out for those students who are doing the master's program through CC, that the math students, we were talking about this idea that they're horizontal, right? Gives us this idea that it's in comparison to something, but horizontal comes from the idea of a horizon. And so the idea, we were discussing that, and where would the horizon be on a line, on a 1D line, right? I think it would be at my ends, right? If I'm looking to positive infinity or negative infinity, those would be my horizons.
So you'd see a line in front of you, but nothing to the right or left.
That's all I would see.
You have to turn.
I don't know if I'm right, but I thought it was a fun thing to think about, because I might be able to have a horizon even if I don't have something that's horizontal, the way we understand it.
Would it be a horizon if it is not, like, your line could actually be at an angle or something? It's like you said, without comparison, you don't have, so it could be actually a vertical line, but you're still calling it a horizon because it's as far as you can see east from the west. But you don't even have an east and west or north and south. You don't know where you are.
I have a
in
left
all
and a
of that.
right, right?
Yeah, you need a plane.
That's all I have. I think of
Yeah.
it, for anybody who's read Flatland, I think of it as like the light, right? The light that might be at either end. If I was looking, that where that light would be at the end would be sort of my horizon. And if you think about it, if you think about just, I'm going too deep here, I know, but if you think about going to the beach and we're in 3D, right? And I think about the horizon, it's kind of like a line, right? It's a 1D line in a 2D plane. So I've had to step back dimensions to sort of pick out what that is. So maybe that helps us to think that the horizon on a 1D might just be a point. Anyway, just fun things to think through.
I love Michelle's comparison. If you can read it, it's like being in the center of the earth and drawing a line. Where is the reference for horizon?
You mean literally in the center of that, and you wouldn't know that there was the volume around you.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting and eerie to think about. Hmm.
So does the comparison is also probably familiar to you guys, besides comparing on the number lines that Kirsty's talking about. It's a word that we use a lot in classical education in our 5 common topics. Kirsty, do you want to address why is comparison an important common topic in math studies?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that idea of comparison is one of the things that makes the math map such a classical way of learning math. I mean, we're going through all the 15 different tools we have for learning, but when we think about comparison, and I look at 2 ideas and I see what's the same and what's different mathematically, that helps me to determine what the order is, right? Where does something slot in comparison to something else? That's where so much of our math learning comes from, because it's all about pattern finding, right? That mathematics is so much about pattern finding. And even if you talk to somebody who's doing advanced research, they're still looking for patterns and then trying to determine, do those patterns always hold, right? And so our very first pattern is, if I'm counting, right, 1, 2, 3, 4, well, I add one more thing and I get the next number. Does that pattern always hold? And pretty early on, we believe that pattern always holds, right? Nobody's ever counted all the numbers. I wonder if God has, right? Right. But we go, oh, that pattern holds. Well, then I might give you something else. I might say 1, 3, 6. And somebody might go, oh, I know the pattern. The next number is going to be 6, because you were declining. You went times 3 times 2 times 1. Or somebody else might say, no, I think the pattern is that you added 2 and then you added 3. And so if I add 4, I'm going to get 10, right? That there's a lot of different ways I could take those 3 numbers and project a pattern from them. And mathematics is saying, okay, I've got this pattern and I've figured out this rule. Now I have to show that it's the right rule. And so that comes from comparison, by looking and saying, okay, I've noticed this, does it still hold? And I'm constantly comparing those patterns with ever increasing, increasingly complex ideas that have been defined, right? To see. And so that's really how mathematics has been built, is through this comparison of patterns and seeing if we can determine the rules that make them true.
You make me think about something I've been taking out a lot of this year of the math map. We used to have a lot of problems that said answers will vary, because actually mathematics is not always consistent. And that pattern you gave just shows how, if you don't know more information, you have choices of what the answer is. And so it's made me realize why textbooks are just really difficult for people to write that love math, because the best questions have multiple answers and they give you something to think about. But a parent who doesn't feel confident about math doesn't like that at all. They want to know what's the answer. And so we've gone through and have places where I think it was probably maybe a more interesting lesson. We've dealt with, okay, is there a way to accomplish the same thing and yet help the parent who isn't quite sure how to answer things? And you guys know this, like when you go to the back of the book and it says something like, 2 squared is the answer and your child came up with 4. And then you got to figure out what form was it supposed to be in? So we're just even comparing our forms, and that can make it feel like math is part of that foreign language. Like, why is one right and not the other one? People, just struggle over trying to find the answer because we're not so confident about just the idea of looking at patterns and coming up with our own comparisons. But while you were talking about that, I was thinking about how, as parents, we're natural mathematicians because we're constantly teaching our children to compare because we love them and we know how to do it, and we do it very, very well. Just something happens when they become, say, fractions and exponents. We don't want to do it anymore. We don't know how to do it. Somehow we can't make that cross into that analogy. So like, for instance, when you're telling your child something's hot or cold, they're comparing, or more or less, they're comparing. Up, down, directions, like we were just talking about. All the words you do, like my April's teaching Lily how to knit and crochet. Would you think there's not comparing patterns going on? And so it's like constantly we're in the process of comparing things. So do you want to give some other examples of how we're natural mathematicians? Sherry says fractions of food.
My boys used to argue, like suddenly they were brilliant mathematicians when they had to share food they like, comparatively.
That is really good.
Constantly measuring time, figuring out, okay, it takes me 20 minutes to get there. I want to be there right on time. I want to be there early. So I need to leave 25 minutes before. So we're constantly trying to figure all that out.
That's good. So what about comparing things that don't feel mathematical yet have, just like the chemistry example, have an element of science and math to them, like colors, light green, dark green. Where's the math in that? What does that do for us?
What's fun is when you know that those colors all have numbers assigned to them in a color wheel when you're playing with like lights. So I work with the lights for the sanctuary, and you can dial it in and you have to find the exact, you want the one on the left to match the one on the right.
Yeah. And think about our families, our family members that are maybe into fashion and they want the color to be coordinated. Do we see the beautiful outfit and say, oh, you look beautiful, what a great mathematician you are? Like, why don't we say that?
Why don't we?
We need to change our words because we think it's only calculating on a piece of paper. Any more? Oh, okay. Sherry's other example.
Sherry has, yeah, that's good.
Can you explain it, Sherry?
Oh, just comparatively, we know the time of day based on the amount of sunlight. Like I can look out the window and go, oh, it's getting dusk compared to when it's noon. So that comparatively, even seasons, based on the amount of, when the sun rises and when the sun sets. The kids can see that too, when it's time to come in for dinner, when it's getting dusk.
Yeah, so just like, to me, using the right words. There was a couple over, there weren't kids that I'm homeschooling by any means, they're my age. And I just made the comment that, don't you love it when we get past the winter solstice and the light gets longer? Right? Just always just talking about creation the way it really is, and what we can see.
Oh,
So
Donna, that's good.
How
Donna
many
has how many
pages to the
pages? Yeah. Go ahead.
how
Yeah, I
many
love
pages
that.
to the end of the chapter versus what I need to do when I need to do something other than read. Do I have time
Yes.
to get to the next chapter?
I
or not?
remember that was an exercise on challenge day when they would come home and then divide their book up into how many pages they had to read to finish by next week.
I still have 10 more in Patriots history before tomorrow.
So here's a true confession. When I was younger, one of my mom's favorite stories to tell about me is that when I was younger, the subject of math came up and they asked me my opinion. And I said that the only reason why we needed numbers was to know what page we were on in our books. So.
Oh boy, did that reason go away with Kindle. And not really, right?
So we had an interesting, in our Challenge B class today, the students like to sing amen. They have an amen song that we sing at the end of our prayer, and they made up their own harmonies. Well, today it did not go well. And one of the students said, okay, that was really off. Let's not do that key ever again. And so just by hearing, they were able to hear that it wasn't right.
So sound is a rhythm and harmony and waves and like light does and color.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. I don't know, did these kind of things help you as parents want to do more math with your kids, or at least use better words, or like, what can we continue to do as a book club to get better at this? What do we get the most joy out of?
As I'm going through the math map for the master's class, we're also creating a glossary. And as much as I hate it, I also love it, because it's forcing me to do something that I know I need to do, but I don't necessarily want to do. And I mean, even looking right here, and I don't know how to pronounce it, which is always my issue, the ABSCISSA. That was a new one for me. And it's in my glossary to my left here, and I enjoy that. I enjoy new words. I enjoy, but also understanding fully what that means.
That's good. Yeah, we have that word hoard segment and the words aptly spoken. And if people want to bring in interesting words to chat in on this one, that would be great. Like what a math word that I've been, I just like saying it and I've been studying it recently, is rehypothecation. It's a financial term about money. Right, so that'd be a fun one to just study, and it's not easy to roll off your tongue, kind of like onomatopoeia in English, things like that. So pronunciation is important too. Okay, so I'll tell you what I like about what you guys do is when you said our challenge B seminar, we did this, or A, I love those stories. Do you guys just, if you share them with us and then in the recording, some other parent hears them, the tutors later, they will really appreciate that. It just makes my heart glad. So, Brittany, tell us about your challenge for students.
Can you see me? Can you hear me? I'm cooking at the same time while I'm listening. So after my
So good.
community day today, but they are learning all kinds of things. In fact, we had a great conversation today based on a quote that I heard you say, Leigh. You said that all artists are mathematicians, and I've got poets in my community and creative students, and I've got a lot of engineers too. And so we shared tips for, we had a wonderful conversation based on your quote and thought about how all the arts are helping us become artists and truth seekers. And then we shared tips with one of my students who asked for prayer because he was struggling to organize his schedule so that he could accomplish his goals for a senior thesis. And he said, things are colliding. I need help figuring out what my goals are and how I might better order my tasks. And so we did pray for him. And then we all shared, this is how we might encourage each other and help hold each other accountable and cheer each other on as they accomplish that together. So that involved ordering time, which is something we talk about in the Discoverers Bunch and Challenge 4. It's just lovely. They keep saying, what seminar are we in? It's woven together. I can't untangle it. And then I love it. So it was really good.
Those are really good stories.
Thank you.
That's really great. Yeah, Jill, tell us yours.
I told my Challenge 3 students, we've done a semester of bringing in lots of math to share and talking about some different concepts, actually a lot of dimensional concepts too. And what would that look like in a different dimension? And what dimension is this in? What parts can we name? Because my students are all different levels of what they're doing at home, different books, different things they're studying. So I told one student that, I told them all, but one particular student, she was saying, sometimes she just doesn't know what to bring in. So, you could bring in a piece of art and how it relates to math and that could be something you choose to share. And she was just shocked. I said, well, yes, you can. There's art in math. When we talked about what different things could be discussed there, what dimensions that might include, what math laws it might represent. And I think it's going to open some things up for students who feel that maybe what they're bringing, what calculations they're bringing, they might not want to share what they're working on at home, but to invite others to talk about math and art would give them a chance to participate in the seminar.
Yeah, I wonder if like manufacturing or cooking or sewing is analogous in the sense of what you just said, that we want to eat, so therefore we'll figure out the cost and the items. We'll do that little bit of calculation so the food tastes good, right? That we're constantly having to incorporate the idea of proportions and numbers and values for anything that we create. So that was really good.
Michelle has a good question, Leigh and Kirsty.
I was thinking maybe Kirsty could answer that one.
Yeah, is math always quantitative in its comparison, or is it ever qualitative, like adjectives and adverbs? That's such a good
That is a good
consideration.
question.
Mhm.
Well, I think that one of the things that math does is it helps us to quantify things so that they can be compared. Right, because one of the things we talk about is the fact that we have, and actually in response to this, if we look at the quote, the Bible verse here that's on the screen, would you like to read that, Julie? I've got it half covered up.
Sure. It says, it's from 2 Corinthians 10:12, not that we dare to classify or compare ourselves with some of those who are commending themselves. But when they measure themselves by one another and compare themselves with one another, they are without understanding.
So it really hit me today, just getting back to that idea of qualitative versus quantitative. Right now, all the math that we understand is ordered off of 0. Imagine for a minute if everything you knew was now ordered off of 13.6. Right? So now 14 and 13.2 are symmetric around your origin. Right? And now you can start to see how everything that we understand kind of gets upended because we're not using the correct standard. Right. It just made me think about a conversation I had today, because we were talking about young women especially, but young men too, who compare themselves to a false standard, right? That they're so bombarded by images that usually are not real, that have either been purposely chosen from an angle, but more often have been edited in some way. And so these young men and women are not comparing themselves to a right standard, right? And so that means that their judgment is entirely off, because if they look in the mirror and they don't look like the images that they're being bombarded by, right, something's off. Just like if I suddenly said, my number line's oriented at 13.6. And so, although we're talking about something that is quantitative in one case and qualitative in the other case, both of them need to have the right standard or the right origin, right? The right determining point for our comparison. And so we can use that quantitative idea of mathematics to help our students see qualitative, right? Whether or not their judgment is right. I'm trying to think if there's a place where I would say, I mean, we use words like longer, shorter, bigger, smaller. And so we may be able to compare things without numbers in mathematics, but I think we're still always going to have it in some qualitative sense versus quantitative. I think qualitative starts getting a little bit, all right, is this better? Is this worse? Right? Is this more true or less true? And I think mathematics is always going to come back to, well, how do we assign a measure to that, to determine that? So I don't know if that really helps answer your question. But I think it's the power of mathematics is that we can see things that seem to be quantitative, that I can quantify and understand, that then those concrete ideas are going to help to illuminate some of the qualitative things that maybe are a little bit more abstract. And so it's a way God gives us of interacting with something in one way that we maybe can see and not argue with so much, to illuminate those things that feel as though there's more judgment, but we're still saying no, they both require having that right origin. for example.
So mathematics can give us some theological peace. I put in the chat because I just want to not forget it. So Rabbi Zacharias used to have a really beautiful sermon where he talked about measuring, and he made the example of that we don't measure 2 raindrops. Let's say we do 2 marbles, because when you add them together, it's totally different things that happen, and that we can take a paradigm from one area of our lives and misapply it if we don't really understand how the terms work. Okay, so Donna, thanks for the base 10 and 2 standard and 12 for works and clocks. We're going to be, you will see that throughout the math map curriculum, that we definitely do 99% of the things we do in decimal base 10, but we will make sure that the children have an opportunity to look at other bases for counting, because this is great what you wrote. We do use other bases. We just intuit them. We don't notice what's going on with some of them. So does anybody else want to say anything about this verse before we end? We got just a few seconds left. Because do you find yourself as a math person or not a math person comparing yourself?
Well, that's a comparison right there, Leigh.
I know, I know. And should we? Because we're supposed to, right? This is saying we should compare ourselves to the Lord. That would make life go better too.
Well, and it is a picture of humility. So understanding, they're without understanding, the ones that compare to one another, they don't understand the base or the starting point of us being, dead in our sin. That is our starting point. And comparing, we are now heirs with Christ. How does that how does that happen? So a complete state of humility. I think when we compare ourselves, that's just pride. I do it all the time.
Yeah, we all do. It's very hard to not. I know one time I was swimming in the lake with a man that's a good friend to our family, and he was just going on about how bad everything is and how he would never do things the way other people do it. And he wasn't a Christian, and he just was getting a little bit uppity. And so I looked at him and I said, it sounds to me like you think you're better than the average human being. And he said, I do think that. I don't know what's wrong with all of them. And I said, Joe, so how do you think you compare to Jesus Christ? And then he just looked at me and said, oh, Leigh. He was without words at that point. So with that, I just want to remind you that learning the language of math is going to help all of us see the unseen and hopefully see our Lord and Savior even more. So take advantage of your CC membership and prepare yourself to redeem your love of math. And I will see you next week.
Hey, Leigh, I'm going to put that sequence down here, and then you guys can think about it next week and see if anybody figures it out. So I'll just give you the first.
Oh my.
Here's a great example of where
Put it in.
You can spend hours and come up with all kinds of things that work for the first few and not the ones after that.
Are you putting in the chat or where?
No, well, I was trying to put
down
that
here.
on the screen. Yeah.
Oh, look at you writing on the screen.
Well, it's kind of doing a weird thing. So
you have 1, 11, 21, 12, 11, 1, 1,
I'll give you one more.
1,
I have to go over this.
2, 2, 1, 3, 1, 2, 2, 1.
Sorry, one more. Oh, wait, yeah, that's right.
You know what, Kirsty, send it to me too by text and we'll get it out on the Facebook question thing.
Okay.
Is that 3, 1, 2, 2, 1, 1?
It is 3,
Is that
1, 2, 2, 1, 1. Yes.
Okay.
All right, so we have a puzzle for next week. Show it to your challenge students.
Yes. How fun is this?
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
Take
Kirsty.
care.
Thank you.